break anymore this afternoon due to the scheduling. And I think, again, some people are leaving also early, so we want to maximize the time that we have for everyone to hear the presentations. So we are not gonna hold it against you if you want to go to the men's or ladies' room or get some coffee also during the presentations and speeches. Feel free to move if you need to. And then we will move on to the subsession 3C, which is measuring ecosystem condition, degradation, and loss of ecosystem services. And I would like to introduce Kaija Oras from Statistics Estonia as the chair of this subsession and also the moderator for our last session, subsession, which will be the panel discussion.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah. Okay.
And then you have to wait.
Okay. Yeah. So it's welcome to this session when we actually move to a quite different topic, but which is, on the other hand, well related to the climate aspects, which we were talking in the morning, and response measures. So it's, in one hand, one of the major potential impacts from climate change and other disasters is to natural capital itself. So we kind of all agree on that, and we are all worried about. So, and it's reflected in the condition of ecosystems. But in another hand, ecosystem itself also serve a role in disaster risk reduction. For example, we will see today in case of the coastal ecosystems. So, and all of us are aware that the changing climate can lead to a loss of ecosystem services we are all worried about. And in this area, scientific community plays a big role, and initiative has come actually from scientific side, but now we have this very fresh standard, which is SEEA ecosystem accounting, and a lot of countries, or some countries, depending where angle you're looking at, are already starting to implement it. And in this session, we are looking on the possibilities what SEEA could provide. So we're looking at the measuring of ecosystem condition, degradation, and also loss of ecosystem services. And this area, we have, in one hand, we have we have GIC today here, yeah, who will present us, and who are actually kind of the forerunners in this debate. And they will show us, in one hand, what could be done with the help of the modeling regarding ecosystem extent, condition, and the services. But they also show us how to link this information to the economic data, and how these results could be used in order to be better decisions regarding the ecosystems, and the restorations could be made. And when we hear from a shirt, who actually is presenting the UNSD Ilaria's presentation on the Kunming protocol and the role of the SEEA in reporting regarding for the global biodiversity framework. And in one hand, about the ecosystem extent accounts, what could be measured, but also response measures, what are they, where the SEEA could support in sense of expenditure figures and subsidies figures, and how it would, what it would mean to the countries, and what could be covered. And after that, we will have a three country presentation, which are actually very different. In a way, we are looking from a different policy perspective, and countries are on the different phase of implementation of a SEEA. So we will have one talking, was it now in the order, but the first here Lithuania one, talking about the condition accounts, which is freshly established as far as learned. And then we hear a kind of case study made by Australia about the mitigation adaptation of regarding the coastal issues related to flooding issues, related to the climate change, but also the mitigation in sense of carbon sequestration, blue carbon. So very interesting presentation. And afterwards, Ukraine will tell us what they have been doing in order to better monitor what is happening in their ecosystem. And after each presentation, I will open the floor for the questions. So some questions, so we can have a kind of clarifying questions immediately after the presentations, as the presentations itself are very different. So, okay. So now I've introduced Alessandra Lanotta and Joanna Grammaticopoulos, and they will talk one after another on the different aspects, what we have been doing and how the data could be used. Over to you.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks to all the people that they are present here and the invitation from the organizers. We're really happy to participate in this discussion. So I am Ioanna Grammaticopoulos. I will represent the European Commission and Joint Research Center in ISPRA. And together with my dear colleague Alessandra Lanotta, we will talk about the ecosystem service accounts, the work we do in GRC under INCA project, and how the ecosystem service accounts relate to economy and economic performance. So the presentation has three main parts. I will start with some brief updates on the regulation, the amendment of regulation on new environmental economic accounts. And I'm very lucky that Eurostat is here, because all questions with that respect can be also addressed by Eurostat. The next part is about some history elements of INCA and the current state of work. And the last part is exactly the links between ecosystem service accounts and economy, from the trade, the impacts on trade, integration to macroeconomic models, to vulnerabilities. And the closure of the presentation will be with respect to climate change, from the climate change mitigation and adaptation policies that we were talking today. So the brief update on the regulation number 691 has been under an amendment, and that amendment was about introducing new environmental economic accounts modules, part of which are the ecosystem accounts. And in specifically around the ecosystem accounts, we are interested in INCA under three main modules: the ecosystem extend accounts, ecosystem condition accounts, and ecosystem services accounts. For the latter, there are at the moment under the law proposal 7 ecosystem services. And the latest update is that this proposal has been approved by the Council and the Parliament already since mid of February this year. And as soon as the regulation will be published, the regulation will come into force. So that means that member states will have the obligation to submit and report ecosystem service accounts on a yearly basis. The first reference year will be 2024. So countries, as Kaya informed me today, because I have forgotten totally, they will have to start preparing for this submission. And the first submission will happen around December 26. Then it will go through a validation exercise from Eurostat. And by 2027, those data will be published and will be available for practitioners and other stakeholders that they have interest on this data set. So that's more or less the updates on the policy side. And then I would like to talk a little bit about the project and why the project came into life. That was happening in the context of SEEA. At that time, the SEEA was in an experimental phase, and the idea was that we need a project in Europe to experiment and test exactly the framework of SEEA. So this is how the idea came along. And that was a joint effort between Eurostat, DGM, DGRTD, EEA, and GRC. And one of the most main outcomes of this effort, of this project, is the platform, the INCA website. Actually, it's a website platform where all information about the data, the procedure we follow in INCA, the glossary, the news are published there. So I welcome all of you to have a look. I would like to make a note here that the site is under an updating phase at the moment because we are about to publish new data. So we are working on updating our data in our maps there. So just a small note for this one. A short description of the timeline of INCA, some historical elements here. It launched in 2017. The first task of the project was to provide a methodological framework upon which all the next pilot applications were based. And since 2018 up to 2021, GRC was working on and experimenting on different ecosystem services based on INCA methodology. So you can see here that there has been a lot of services studies under ecosystem services accounts, and all this work and the outcomes have been published in GRC technical reports. And during this process, of course, a lot of knowledge and a lot of lessons learned have been acquainted. The essence of all services and all the outputs of that era are nicely summarized in a policy report that was published in 2021 that you see here. And at the same time, GRC was providing support on the preparation of the legislation amendment. At that time, it was just a proposal. So given the fact that the INCA was going through this knowledge process, it was possible also to provide inputs into the preparation of the law. And then another important element is to put INCA in the context of SEEA, and the SEEA framework has moved since 2021 from the experimental phase to being a global framework, a global standard. So it's a SEEA ecosystem accounting framework at the moment. And in that context, it is important to highlight that the INCA follows the SEEA as well as the legal proposal. But at the same time, the project moved a little bit further. It enhanced the framework of SEEA into making ecosystem accounting more operational. And I will explain very shortly what I mean by saying operational. In this operational procedure, we start with three elements, three parts. We start with the ecological side. That means what ecosystem types can provide in terms of services, and this is what we call potential supply. But at the same time, we study the demand side, and that is what sort of needs and demands society and economy have with respect to the services that are supplied by the ecosystem types. When these two elements brought together, then we have what we call actual flow or use. This is what is reported under the supply and use table that is mandated also under the SEEA framework. But when this is not happening, and in particular where demand remains higher than the supply, then we have what we call mismatch, which is very policy relevant module of the ecosystem service accounts. We account for all these four modules under INCA. We account them in physical terms, and the actual flow, we account it also in monetary terms. So we monetize the ecosystem services. And we have 4 accounting periods at the moment, and another one is coming. And we incorporate at the moment 9 ecosystem services under the database, and we expect 2 new services to be added there. And all this information is available in maps and in tabular data, in aggregation, and in national levels scale. yeah, that's all about the Inca operational procedure and data production. So currently, what we do under the project is that we work, as I said, in 2 new ecosystem services, namely local climate regulation and air filtration, that they have been experimented under the urban thematic accounts and published in the report that you see in the presentation. But also we are trying to pilot on marine ecosystem services accounts, studying 3 services at the moment: coastal protection, fish provision, nature-based recreation. At the same time, we are trying to offer support to Eurostat and the member states on the application of the regulation. So what we do is that we work together with Eurostat and the contractor of Eurostat to develop a tool that is a QGIS a tool that member states can use to compile supply and use tables. Currently, this tool is under version 2.0, and it follows, of course, the legal proposal and the SEEA framework. Another development we have under the project is the usefulness of the Inca data. So how exactly the data can be used under certain policy requests. We do this exercise together with DGs and agencies. So, for example, with DG Regio, but also we do it through other units in GRC, since they have received requests from DG Agri, DG ECFIN, European Central Bank, DG Mare, and DG ENV. So we try to see how, for example, natural capital defined by ecosystem services relate to regional growth, and how the Inca can be integrated in general equilibrium models. And the last slide of my presentation, and then I will give the floor to Alessandra because I am already late, is how the ecosystem services accounts are connected to economy and given the condition of the ecosystem. So that is a Sankey diagram you see here that reflects the flow, that depicts the flow of services from different ecosystem types. So when the condition of the ecosystem goes down, this flow also changes. It impacts the change of the flow. And this is how we measure the impact to the society and the economy. And I will pass the floor to Alessandra now. So the floor is yours, Alessandra.
Thank you, Joanna. And actually, you may see this diagram and wonder, yes, very nice, but exactly how does it work? So the idea, I will bring a concrete example. Let's assume that we have as an input variable nitrogen input. Nitrogen input can actually be used to elaborate an indicator on nitrogen concentration that in terms could be used to compute the ecological status of freshwater ecosystem. And this is something that can be used in building an asset account concerning ecosystem condition. The same input variable, the nitrogen input, could also enter in a biophysical model to estimate water purification. That is the ecosystem service that freshwater ecosystem offer to clean the negative externalities of agricultural production when they are using mineral fertilizer, manure, and so on. So in this case, there is an indicator that is feeding both condition accounts and ecosystem service accounts. In other cases, we can have condition indicators that are themselves input variables into ecosystem service modeling. And here 2 examples. The first one is concerning crop pollination. In this case, in condition account, we may have an indicator that relates to species richness that is used as input variable to compute the ecosystem service potential in terms of habitat suitability to host wild pollinators. So this represents what ecosystem can provide in terms of crop pollination. So this is the ecological side. It becomes an ecosystem services if it interacts with the pollinator-dependent crops. So if pollinator-dependent crops are covered by habitat suitable to host wild pollinators, then we have the crop pollination service. That is what we use to fill the supply and use table. At the same time, we can also compute where pollinator-dependent crops are not covered with the presence of habitat suitable to host wild pollinators. And this is where we record a mismatch. Another example, flood control. In a condition indicator, as a condition indicator in the asset account, we may find the impervious surface indicator. And this is used directly as an input variable into the model that we use to estimate the flood control mitigation. And so we provide the ecosystem service potential, what the ecosystem can provide in terms of ecological supply independently whether it is used or not. It becomes a service when this potential interacts with the presence of economic asset and human settlements that need to be protected. When I'm talking about economic asset, I'm referring to agricultural fields, infrastructure, industrial site, and so on. So when we have this interaction, we have an actual flow that we can record in the supply and use table. At the same time, we can also record and map where we don't have this protection that is coming from ecosystem. And this is an additional indicator that we can compute. To use some of the terminology that I heard a lot during the last 2 days, we can have some indicators that are the core ones, that are the ones that are reported in supply and use table, and then we have other indicators that are complement one. Now, we have this to do what? This is just a few examples that I will be very fast in presenting because I guess that there is not a lot of time. First of all, with the mismatch, we are able to map where we need ecosystem restoration. Since we are dealing with services, we are also able to justify why we need to restore ecosystem. In the case of crop pollination and soil retention, because we need to move toward more resilient agricultural practices. In the case of flood control, because we need to adapt to climate change extreme events. In the case of habitat and species maintenance, we need to stop biodiversity loss. And because we can also value in monetary terms, we can assess in monetary terms when we have the service provided, that is the match, but also where we have the mismatch. And in some cases, as you can see here, this can be much higher. So I think that in a cost-benefit perspective, if you have to justify the fact that we need to afford environmental expenditure, we can also show that if we are spending a lot, we are also gaining a lot. I don't have a lot of time, unfortunately, but so I just mentioned other kind of uses, like we can report the ecosystem embedded in the products that are traded, like in this case, the case of water purification. And because we are dealing with the supply and use table that directly are structured in the same way of supply and use table used in SNA, we can also directly link to already existing general equilibrium model. So this is the example of the Asian hornet. It is an invasive alien species. It affects the crop pollination service, and so we are able to shock the variable that is already in the economic model and find out what happens if we don't do anything to stop the spreading of the wasp. So this is an example of how we can actually use these accounts and we don't have to recreate everything. We just need to bridge to already existing economic tools. This is an example that I don't think I have the time to explain, but it relates to the nature-related risk. So by assessing the vulnerability in terms of dependency, in this case of the agricultural sector on ecosystem services, we can also see, assess what is the economic exposure in this case. And this is the last slide that actually is something that I think can relate directly, maybe also later for the discussion on the climate change adaptation, how ecosystem services and their accounting can really support adaptation. First of all, with having a structure by ecosystem services, we can be very granular in identifying which are the flows that we need to assess if we want to account for short-term effect and long-term effect. Then we can, through the mismatch concept, we can locate where the most vulnerable area in terms of ecosystem service provision are. And because of the accounting structure, we can create this, we can compute this shock to assess what is the economic impacts if ecosystem change and therefore ecosystem service provision change. And I think I don't have the time to say more. So thank you for your attention.
I urge you everyone to look at the Lisbeth reports and also the presentations in PDF format. So there is a lot of modeling also available regarding the countries, and this Asian hornet, the migratory species invasion, which causes also influence to economies, export, jobs, is also quite interesting to follow. So this is kind of a modeling for the future. Just one quick question without any long comments could do here as well for in the direction of GIC. If someone wants to explicitly ask something. If no, I would actually ask the concept of mismatch. It's not in SEEA basic framework document. So it's where does it come from? I see kind of a lot of policy uses towards mismatch concept. In sense of restoring expenditures and etc. in the future, but where does it come from?
Actually, it was a learning by doing process. So when we started with our pilot accounts, we experienced the fact that to start with the ecosystem service potential is only the first step. You need to confront with the demand and to find out the service itself, whether it is delivered or not. So this is where the idea of assessing and producing accounts also for the mismatch part came from. And we found out that in terms of policy relevance, this is what is mainly asked from our colleagues, because on one hand, when we talk about ecosystem services, we may be willing to assess the richness of ecosystem in providing services. But on the other hand, especially when we look at nature-related risk, we need to understand how vulnerable is economy when it comes to all those activity that depends on ecosystem services. And this is where the mismatch is helping. And this is why we actually receive quite a number of requests on computing this indicator. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So you all go now to, not now, but tomorrow or later, to check out the GIC's work who hasn't done so. But in the countries, you probably quite soon will be asked from the ministries, how to, what are your country's expenditures or subsidies on biodiversity? And the reason for this is this Kunming protocol of a global biodiversity framework. And so some of these monitoring issues are related to SEEA. And Sjörd will now give us the presentation. And now I ask Sjörd to stick to 10 minutes, as yes. I know there is not that much slide on his presentation.
Yes.
And when we can discuss later, think which are these variables? What do we really need to compile in the countries in the future, as these are the data which statistical organizations quite often, mostly, are responsible for. So it's yours now.
Okay.
Yeah, go on.
Okay, thanks. So I will present this on behalf of the UNSD, who has prepared this presentation. So indeed, I'm going to inform you about the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and in particularly the role of SEEA that it can play for certain goals and targets, and how we are now developing the metadata for these SEEA-related indicators. Yes. So the Global Biodiversity Framework was adopted at the 15th meeting of the Conference of Parties in December 2022. This was a major step forward to monitor biodiversity. It sets out an ambitious pathway to reach the global vision of a world living in harmony with nature by 2025. Some of the major outcomes of this is that a monitoring framework has to be established, including indicators for goals and targets, as well as several mechanisms for planning and monitoring, as well as other decisions regarding resource monetization and capacity building. In adopting the Global Biodiversity Framework, all parties committed are setting national targets to implement it. So this provides an overview of the framework, and as you can see, the Global Biodiversity Framework contains 4 global goals for 2050 and 23 action-oriented targets. Well, you can read for yourself. I will not go into read them out for you, but as you can see, there are several different goals and targets all related to ecosystem maintenance, ecosystem services, biodiversity, etc., etc. Now, the monitoring framework includes so-called headline indicators, which are expected to be used nationally in the national biodiversity strategies and the action plans, and the national reports, and also in global review. Additionally, the monitoring framework also includes binary, component, and complementary indicators, which may be used for national and/or global analysis. And it's important to note that this national reporting is part of a legal obligation of the parties. So all parties involved really have to report if they have the data on this these indicators. An expert group was established, the so-called ad hoc technical expert group, the ATEC, and that has to work on several things. First of all, they have to provide technical advice on the remaining and unresolved issues relating to the monitoring framework. They also have to provide guidance on the use of the indicators in national planning and reporting. They have to provide guidance on the ways to fill in temporal and spatial data gaps, including through the use of big data, etc., etc. And also to provide guidance on existing capacity gaps and needs. And so this ATEC has now been established and is meeting regularly to fulfill these tasks. The Global Biodiversity Framework recognizes the important role of statistics and official statistics. As you can read here, it has been noted that the value of aligning national monitoring with the United Nations System of Environmental Accounting statistical standards in order to mainstream biodiversity in national statistical systems and to strengthen national monitoring system and reporting as appropriate according to their national priorities and circumstances. And it also had invited the Statistical Commission to support in the operationalization of the monitoring framework for the biodiversity framework. And when possible, indicators are aligned with existing processes, including the SEEA. So now we come to have a closer look at how SEEA is linked to this Global Biodiversity Framework goals and targets. Basically, what has been done is that a set of indicators were agreed for the monitoring framework, and a number of these indicators that are on this list are directly linked to SEEA, and therefore also should be based on SEEA ecosystem counting as much as possible. There's also one indicator, namely indicator for target 19, that can be linked to the SEEA Central Framework, and particularly with regard to the environmental protection expenditure accounts. Well, the United Nations Statistical Commission at its last meeting in just a few weeks ago, they welcomed that the SEEA ecosystem accounting is going to be used as a basis for these headline indicators. And they also called on National Statistical Office to engage with their biodiversity focal points, encourage the committee to support the implementation of the monitoring framework, and to facilitate collaboration between the statistical and the biodiversity communities to strengthen national monitoring and reporting. In my last part of my presentation, I hope I'm still doing on time. It's about the development of metadata, and that's for us, I think, the most important and interesting part, because for a certain number of these goals and targets, indicators have to be developed, and here SEEA ecosystem, they have to be based on SEEA ecosystem. So what has been done, basically that small task teams have been formed that have looked into these indicators and made some proposals, what would be the best indicators, what's the metadata, etc., etc. So first look at the indicator for goal A, which is about the extent of natural ecosystems. To the left, you can read what is goal A. It's about the integrity, connectivity, and resilience of all ecosystems to be maintained, enhanced, and restored. And one of the headline indicators is A2, and that's about the extent of natural ecosystems. So this indicator aims to show the extent of natural ecosystems as a proportion of the overall area, and to track changes of this in proportion over time. So the indicator, as it has been currently defined, is the extent of natural and semi-natural ecosystem as a proportion of the total area of a country at a particular point in time, expressed as a percentage. Well, this indicator has been discussed by its task team, and it discussed quite at length the scope of what is a natural ecosystem, because that's part of the definition. So how can we define a natural ecosystem? The outcome of this discussion was that to use a broad definition of natural and to also include so-called semi-natural ecosystems. And this is because semi-natural ecosystems are also important to monitor and also to sustainably manage. Also, the task team discussed several options to define the indicator, and it was agreed to use the percentage of the natural and semi-natural ecosystems as a proportion of the total area. However, it was recommended to report not just the percentage, but also the actual extent of the ecosystems. In addition, it was agreed to report to disaggregate the data to level 3 of the IUCN global ecosystem typology. Now let's move on to the last indicator that I want to discuss, and this is our indicators for goal B and targets 9 and 11, and these have to do with ecosystem services. The headline indicator for B1 is about services, ecosystem services provided by ecosystems. And there are for the two targets, they are a bit related. They are about the benefits from sustainable use of wild species and services provided by ecosystem, focusing on regulating services. Well, in this task team, I've been involved myself, so I can tell a little bit more about this one. Here, the indicator, this is quite a difficult indicator, I must say. It's still also in the development, so there's no final solution yet. But in principle, the indicator aims to track trends in the provision of ecosystem services, responding to the wording in Goal B that ecosystem services should be maintained and enhanced, and those currently in decline are being restored. Well, the proposed indicator that we have now is defined as the average rate of change in the provision of a set of ecosystem services in a particular time period compared to a baseline year for a country or on a larger scale. So there was quite a large discussion if this headline indicator should be based on biophysical measures or just on monetary values. But in principle, the outcome of the discussion was that the preferred measure would be on biophysical measurement. But in addition, a complementary indicator based on monetary valuation could be proposed. There are still quite some issues that have been discussed and, well, are still under discussion. The first one is the actual list of ecosystem services that are recommended to be included in this indicator, because, well, if you include a certain number of indicators and you add some other ecosystem services, the indicator obviously will change. And of course, also for international comparison, in principle, you would like to include the same set of ecosystem services, but that may not be feasible for all countries, also because not every ecosystem service is relevant for a certain country. Another important issue is about the finalization of the aggregation method for an index of ecosystem services and how to average the trends across ecosystem services over time. We are currently testing this indicator. For example, for the Netherlands, we've also tested this indicator, and it's quite interesting results it provides. But still, some of these issues are still under discussion, and hopefully they will be finished by the end of this year, because this is my last slide. This is the process for the development of the metadata. So this is going to happen this year. Well, the UNSD is the custodian agency for these indicators based on SEEA. And for each indicator, a metadata document is being developed with the definitions, methodology, etc., etc. And well, this metadata has to be finished this year by the task teams. I've already discussed those. And well, this whole process should be finished by the end of this year. And then through the ATEC, they should be adopted by the COP16. So it's quite tight time schedule. And after the adoption, then the national reporting for all these indicators will take place in early 2026 and in 2029. So in that regard, I think this is quite an important process, both for us, but also, of course, for our policymakers, because they, in the end, they have to report on all these indicators. Thanks.
Oh. Okay, sure. Thank you. Yeah?
No, it's okay.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Sherd. Yes, you covered the ecosystem service indicators and the extent indicators and how to aggregate single indicators to the aggregate value. But of course, we probably all know that the basic data of indicators are single indicators are most important part, and evaluation of the trends is quite a tricky question. Whether more of a provisioning services is good, or the better state is good, or more recreation is good. So we will see how it all will develop. It's not ready, I understand, yet. But you didn't mention the expenditure indicator, which was mentioned on the slides, but probably not much information yet about the one on expenditures. So what will be included? Yeah. And one question from the floor as well. Yeah. Sherd will answer, and get ready. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure about the expenditure indicator. I know it's quite important. And I think, as I mentioned, it will be based on SEEA Center Framework, so EPA. I'm not directly involved in the international process itself. I only know that our ministry already asked for this information for this indicator. So on the national level, we already have started thinking how to provide it. And of course, we base it on our EPA data. Thanks.
Okay, we have a question from Finland.
Thank you. Yeah, I changed my hat to finish one for just a few minutes. I actually can say something about this, because I actually was a part of this technical expert group on financial reporting, which was part of the AHTEC or under AHTEC. And that focused on the expenditure indicators and working on the metadata for these 5 indicators that were part of targets 18 and 19, or the D targets. And the process was, it was quite short time period that the expert group worked on. It was from, I think, last November until February, and it has presented the results now, I think, to the AHTEC in the middle of March. And I was really happy to be involved, because I was actually the only statistician in this expert group, and I was very happy to be there representing also the SEEA side, and to try to also include the SEEA methodology in the metadata sheets. But now I think it will progress then together with the rest of the metadata with the AHTEC onwards.
Okay, so from your perspective, are our monetary accounts granular enough for this exercise?
Actually, that's an interesting discussion, and I think it's one that probably should be had more as well, because there was this biofin taxonomy that's used to also calculate spending on biodiversity and the financing on biodiversity, and it does include quite a lot of broader range of expenses and investments, because it is in SEEA we have the primary purpose, and we can have the one expenditure only in one class. So if it's used for something else and also biodiversity, it won't show up in the biodiversity expenditures. And that's why there was quite a lot of discussion on maybe that the SEEA or the SEPA classification and the SEPA, is it too narrow for this kind of monitoring, and would there be possibility to also somehow extend the SEEA accounts also to have the secondary purposes included?
Okay, so we have already gotten input from a panel discussion later today about the secondary purpose. Yeah, okay, Raul, yes. Mexico.
Thank you, Guy. I feel that summarize the SOE is very, very important because include the different phases and the different templates from seeing the SEA ecosystem and the CBD framework. I think this is very interesting, and the cross-cutting is very, very important. But I feel that it's very important to have any reflection because of every country in our cases are working with the manual of the standard statistical standard as the SEA ecosystem that today is standard. But I don't know if every country compile accounting as a standard manner, standard way. I feel that results of the ecosystem accounting are different in presentation, in indicators, and the results, and it's not the standard the way as we sharing the result of ecosystem accounting. And I mean, it could be a problem when we try to input these results for monitoring the biodiversity framework, because are very different the results. Solution is to working with the focal points in CBD in countries, because of we have any framework but that is global, that is general, but it's very important to working in the local plane to introduce the similar indicators in the local framework for biodiversity in each country is very, very important. Not only in general, but in local points is very, very important. And probably we could understand that information as we produce is not necessarily a direct input from the framework in their countries for monitoring biodiversity. Could be not. And I feel that is very important maybe to thinking in a global consultation as if our information is an input directly for the biodiversity framework, yes or not simply. And if there are plans to increasing our information to continue be this kind of supporting. I feel that is very important to recognize if we are useful or not for the monitoring of biodiversity. Remember that in a strict sense, biodiversity accounts is very, very complex. For example, we have working with environmental protection expenditures, but not in a specific expenditure in biodiversity. Today, we have working with biofin to try to implement any methodology to have, in a strict sense, expenditures on biodiversity. And it's not easy, but I feel that it could be important thinking in a global consultation. Thank you.
And just a small comment from UNEP as well, yeah, thank you. And then maybe if there is something to reply, when you shared the reply, yes.
Just I think just a summary of Raul's question. UNSD is a custodian agency for these 4 indicators to support biodiversity framework through the system of environmental economic accounting. Do you know anything, any plans of UNSD to provide capacity building activities as a custodian agency to support countries with these indicators? And I think your answer will answer the Raul's question as well, because the idea is that we have a lot of approaches and not everyone follows the standard. Thank you.
Thanks for these questions and remarks. Yes, of course, it's an issue that, of course, we have to see ecosystem accounting as an international statistical standard. But I can't remember the exact number, but only, well, a certain number of countries are working on it, right? If in the European Union, well, there will be a legal base, but outside Europe, there's still, of course, not that many countries are working on ecosystem accounting, but maybe this indeed could be a push to start working on it. With regard to your question, is UNSD providing capacity building? I'm not sure at the moment. I know in the past, in recent past, there was the EnCaves project by Bram, so he can maybe maybe also Bram. Do you know if currently UNSD is doing capacity building activities? I passed the question on.
I think there's always the development account, which provides some opportunities. I believe there's also a new project that provides some funding, but Will, you know more?
Maybe I could just mention that there's a joint UNEP and UNDP project, which is called the Early Action Support Project, and that is available for funding for all countries on their implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework to support their implementation. Exactly what that support consists of is up to the countries to decide. So for the statistical officers in the room, I would encourage you, as Raul said, to contact your biodiversity focal point, your CBD focal point, normally in the Ministry of Environment, and leverage to try and get support for implementation of the accounting aspects contained within the framework, and that would be a way to get some support.
Seems that sounds like a solution, so it's find your local CBD focal points, and that's the way to proceed currently. But we will now have a look on the condition account and how condition account could help to monitor the Kyoto process as well. So it's a bit, the Lithuanian approach is usual condition account without any specific emphasis on climate issues, but soil carbon is actually something which is very relevant to climate mitigation issues, and not only preserving current, but also kind of improving the condition of soil carbon. But so if you can manage in 10 minutes, so we could still stick to the time, and you actually had in the beginning 10 minutes and prepare one question. So it's very interesting presentation coming. It's something which would be mainstream for most of the European countries. First trial to compile the condition account, and Adam, floor is yours. After 1 second.
Thank you. I'll be presenting on our work on ecosystem condition accounting in Statistics Lithuania. So maybe for a really short introduction, ecosystem accounting in general is a really new and sort of experimental area in our office. So we only started to work in this direction on 2021, and sort of the first steps was a Eurostats grant project on pilot ecosystem extent and forest condition accounts. So I'll be focusing on the condition accounts. And at the moment in our office, ecosystem condition accounting sort of consists of two different parts or projects. So the first one is on the forest condition accounting, and the second one, ecosystem condition variable account. So for the main objectives, maybe for the first project, so at the beginning it was to compile a experimental ecosystem extent account. Upon it, to select a few forest ecosystem key characteristics and to collect available data on those variables, to determine a general reference condition and to establish it for a corresponding reference level for each variable for the forest ecosystem, and finally to derive a forest ecosystem condition index. So on the second project, or the second part, the main objective was to collect the data on the ecosystem condition indicators according to the Eurostat's proposal for the new amending regulation. And finally, of course, to georeference everything, map everything out, and sort of to disseminate to the public and to our stakeholders. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So, for this project, we cooperated with a university to help us sort of scientifically, and we used the SEEA methodology and the SEEA ecosystem condition topology for the set of our forest ecosystem condition characteristics. So as you can see, there are quite some data sets we used, and all of the data sets are our own national data sets. So this is our basic workflow. So firstly, we selected and described a set of forest variables. So we determined the reference levels of those variables. We converted them into indicator values. We gave them certain weights. Those variables, we did the aggregation of forest condition indicators to subindices, and finally we had and derived a forest condition index, and we sort of mapped everything out and disseminated it. So on the first step, on the selection and description of the set of forest variables, so one of the main selection criteria was the availability and quality of the data. So basically this meant that all of the selected condition variables were available for extraction from a reliable source, and they had to have a prolonged sort of time series, and also they had to be updated on a regular basis so that we could update our work in the future. And also a very important criteria was the scale of the detail of selected variables. So all the selected variables are presented in connection with each individual forest tax parcel, so they're sort of really of great detail. So this is a table to represent the set of forest variables we've chosen. So shortly we've selected 16 variables in total, and the idea was to select at least 2 variables in each class. So we managed to do that. Only in one class of chemical state characteristics we had a sort of lack of data, so we, oh sorry, I didn't push the button. Yeah, we didn't manage to select it. Yeah, so the most sort of trickiest part was the determination of the reference levels. So firstly, in order to determine the reference levels and to sort of assess the ideal state of forests, we used the 1950s spatial data set for forest lands with a combination of spatial data set of the protected areas in Republic of Lithuania. So the goal was to assess the condition of the forest in the oldest forests of Lithuania, where basically no economic activity is carried out, so the impact on the forests is relatively zero. And also it was necessary to determine what the value of the forest variable should be in the ideal case, in sort of natural state of the ecosystem, and what should it be in the worst case, where we would have, so to speak, a collapse of the ecosystem, in this case forests. Yeah, and finally, the ideal state of the forest was assigned the minimum maximum values of the indicators according to the directions of the reference level values. So here you can see the directions of the reference level values. So I won't go through all of them because it's quite an extensive list. Oh, I always forget to push the button. Yeah. Yeah, so moving forward, we had to convert all the variables into indicators. So basically to set them on a scale from 1 to 0, considering the established reference levels. So the idea is the ideal value of the reference level is equated to 1 and the worst to 0. Finally, to assess and derive the forest ecosystem condition index, which basically shows the state of the forest compared to the ideal condition. So the better the condition of the forest, the closer the index to 1 was. And yeah, in order to do this, we had to rank and weigh all the indicators. So we did it with using analytical hierarchy process, and also there were experts involved in the weighting, which research interests varied from ecological forestry, forest ecosystem services, and so on. And finally, we approved the weighting by our software. Yeah, so this is the weights of the indicators we gave to different indicators. So the biggest weight was given to the landscape characteristic of proximity to the nearest forest, and the rate of forest increase during 10 years. Yes, as for the results, so of course we wanted to disseminate everything and all of the data to be publicly available. So first thing we did, we published our forest ecosystem condition index in our official statistics portal as under experimental statistics in the formats of tables. And of course, we, as said in the beginning, we mapped everything out. So there were quite a few maps made. So for example, here you can see the spatial dispersion of ecosystem condition index in the given years. And we did everything on a few spatial levels. So on the level of counties in our country and elderships. Yeah, this is another example. And finally, as a sort of final dissemination product, we made an interactive forest condition index map. It's publicly available. So everyone can come into the website and sort of scroll through the maps themselves. They can change the given years, etc. And there are certain maps, for example, made in grids on 1 kilometer. So there are quite in a fine detail. And also we published everything, all the geodata sets as open data, so that researchers and stakeholders could basically download the data and do their own analysis. So I'm running out of time. So basically the second project was methodologically similar or the same as the previous one. So it was basically on the ecosystem condition variables according to the proposal for amending regulation. So I won't go through the workflow because it's relatively the same. So we analyzed 8 indicators in total, which spread amongst 6 different ecosystems. Well, one was a combination of cropland and grassland together in the common farmland bird index. So yeah, we referenced everything, and as a result, we also made maps for every variable analyzed. So I just scroll through it, and this project is still in completion. It should be over at the end of the March. So our final result should be also an application where people can and stakeholders can extract everything for themselves. And for a short maybe conclusion, so basically the quality of the generated data is largely determined by the quality of the original spatial data sets. So it's really data driven, and there were certain gaps which we will try to fill in the future. And our sort of main plan for the upcoming years is to go into ecosystem service accounting, because this is sort of the most relevant and important part towards policies of climate change. Yeah, so thank you for attention, and you can always contact me for answers, and yeah, and thank you once again.
Thank you, Adam. One quick question. Armenia, yes, please.
Thank you. Great job done. One quick question. Is it possible to download in georeference format?
It's available, but only for the first part of the project for the forest condition, and hopefully in the late April, the same will be done with the second part.
So go to the website and check what is where. And we are also doing in Estonia work on these lines. So come to our website as well. But now we are going to Australia. We have Peter Meadows talking about us about also more forest, mangrove forest, but also salt marshes. So how these coastal ecosystems are alleviating the impacts of climate change. And is it just the impact, or is there also an adaptation? So let's hear from Peter. Are you there?
I am indeed. Hopefully you can hear me good.
If you could talk in 10 minutes, when we have some minutes for discussion as well. Thank you.
Sounds like a plan. I'll see how I go. Okay, so we were requested by the Ministry for our Environment to look at blue carbon ecosystems. And on the way, we had a bit of a think about, I guess, some of the challenges that are facing us from climate change and how it could relate to the way that we develop sort of ocean ecosystem accounts. So in essence, we're an island. We have lots of coastline. We have lots of people living on the coastline. And sort of with an ongoing threat of storm surges, increase in storm activity and flooding in particular, we're quite interested to see whether or not the SEEA in particular could help to, I guess, make some information available to make some decisions in this sort of space. So we went through a process with our stakeholders from sort of local areas, from government, and from some of the subject matter experts, and really asking a number of questions around what did they need to know about what was there, what did they need to know about condition and how that was improving, what were the kind of services that they were looking for, and in essence, what is sort of the impacts of development on these sort of coastal resources. And through that, it sort of helped us to solve a number of, I guess, some of the data problems that we may have in terms of a need for climate change, a need for economic growth through ecosystems or impact on ecosystems, and thinking a bit more clearly into the future about how we think about our financing for nature. This sort of led to the first National Ocean Account. Again, it was in partnership with the Ministry for the Environment. They helped us to lead some of the stakeholder consultation. Again, it was on blue carbon ecosystems, so mangroves, salt marsh and seagrass in particular. And we released that in 2022, looking for about between 1988 and 2021 for mangroves and the 2021 year for salt marsh and seagrass. This was primarily due to data availability. So we thought we had a good go at actually answering the challenge. And I'll use sort of coastal protection as an example. We did actually measure carbon sequestration or global carbon sequestration services, as well as carbon storage. But I think coastal protection is probably a nice one to really focus in on how some of this could actually benefit the discussion around climate change. So we developed a coastal protection model on the fly, I guess one a better word. There are other models available. The Philippines, there was a very extensive version of how mangroves actually feed into sort of vulnerability and thinking through there. And there are other models like Invest as well that we did look at, but rejected due to the complexity or just it wasn't granular enough for us to work with. And we were really looking at whether we could identify the length of Australia's coastline that was protected by these ecosystems, number of people and dwellings, and what would be the alternative if these ecosystems weren't there. So what could we do? How much would it cost? What sort of degree of protection do we need to provide society and the economy? And this is really a first attempt at sort of consolidating what available information we had on coastal protection services, and pretty much what was available at a national scale, quite largely. So we made a couple of assumptions that one, that salt marsh and mangroves had to be within 200 metres of the coastline. They needed a defined, I guess, width before they were considered to attenuate or to reduce wave action. So this was about 40 metres for salt marsh and at least 90 metres for mangroves. We actually chose 90 metres for salt marsh in the end because we thought we'd keep the two systems in parallel with each other. And being a statistical agency, we like to be a little bit conservative. And we were looking at how these ecosystems would protect up to about 1 kilometre from the coastline. So how much inland inundation was expected from some storm surges. We need to refine the model a bit more with topology, but it was not a bad first go. So it was really just looking at those mangroves that were within 200 metres of the coastline, and we used sort of ArcGIS to identify these as once we had our mangrove extent products and salt marsh extent products lined up. We drew transects through, I guess, at least 40 metres or 90 metres for both salt marsh and for mangroves. And then looked at where that actually overlapped with our population and dwelling estimates. And in fact, from our census data. So it was quite coincidental that 2021 was a census year for us. So we had quite detailed population information down to a very small area. We use a mesh block system, which is pretty much about 100 dwellings and used for sort of collecting information. And then from that, we could sort of aggregate that information, get rid of duplicates, for instance, and then think about how much coastline was actually being protected by these sort of salt marshes and mangroves. So the result of that, we found there was about 150,000 dwellings that were offered protection by salt marsh or mangroves. And I guess that equated to about 280,000 people. Now, to give you an idea of scale for Australia, because we're a hideously big place, from mangroves, you're looking at about 17 or 16.9 thousand kilometres of coastline that's being protected by mangrove ecosystems, and about 3,600 kilometres protected by salt marshes. And we divided that up by sort of our state jurisdictions or state government areas. In particular, we did break it down to a more detailed level. We use a notion called sediment compartment, or I guess as close as we could get to a sort of an ecosystem or an ecoregion for coastlines. We then decided that we'd try and spin that out to, I guess, a monetary estimate. We used a replacement value. At the time, it's probably not the best way of doing it, but it gave us at least consistent result between sort of salt marsh and mangroves. And as you can see, it was about $30 billion for salt marsh and about 140 billion for mangroves. That pretty much equates to about $8 million US dollars per kilometre in terms of the amount being protected. And when you compare that, I guess, with the average net worth of a household, around about that time, the average net worth of a household in Australia was about 750,000 US dollars. So that includes the house plus sort of other investments. So it was probably not a bad estimate. We tried to work out an ecosystem service value of that. Again, we looked at the sort of replacement cost per annum. So we looked at I guess a broad depreciation rate that we applied to the seawall, which was the way we thought about replacing that mangrove or seagrass ecosystem. And as you can see from the results there, it sort of varied around about $1 billion for salt marshes and up to about $4 billion for mangroves. It really depended on the location and proximity to townships in terms of that variability that we found. But as you can see from the picture on the right-hand side there, we had an issue in Australia where someone decided to bulldoze a driveway from their house to the coastline through mangrove ecosystem, and they got charged about $72,000 or $51,000 US per hectare. So there's probably a bit of a mismatch in terms of what the social expectations are around the replacement of mangroves versus what we need to do to actually replace that sort of protection value. I guess the lessons for adapting to climate change, again, the academic research tells us that about 40 metres of salt marsh or 90 metres of mangroves can attenuate wave action and sort of reduce coastal erosion in particular. There's also other benefits in terms of biodiversity, species nursery, carbon sequestration and whatnot that aren't actually included in those values. And thinking through the old alternatives, like building seawalls or moving settlements, we're looking at Indonesia and Philippines in particular as sort of comparisons to that. It seems quite logical to think about investing in sort of ecosystems. I guess from a statistical point of view, it seems cost effective to maintain those ecosystems anyway. And more we're getting interest from our disaster management areas to think about how we can actually include these and improve these estimates into their sort of disaster management regime at the moment. Some of the lessons from Australia, for your first account, don't be afraid to narrow the range of accounts. We focus particularly on blue carbon ecosystems. It was a good response to, I guess, the push from our Ministry for the Environment to think about where the offsets were for sort of carbon in the country. But it also gave us the opportunity to think about a bit more broadly about what are the other services. But we kept it narrow deliberately because we had a very short period of time that we're working with. Work with agencies and sort of peak bodies in that particular subject matter, those areas, to find out what they're trying to change and how they use data. That was kind of instrumental to understanding the number of products that we could produce, the geographic distribution of our data, and really thinking about the amount of interaction that we could have or to make available for those areas. And work towards a close solution as possible, but try and stay as close as you can to the SEEA standard. And otherwise, enjoy the discussions afterwards. And that's it from me, Claire.
Michael, so now the floor is open. So Michael is expecting a discussion, vivid discussion. But first, so from your media, so what were these kind of really kind of motivating kind of reactions. What you said that it was a motivating debate. Something.
Yeah, I mean, the media picked it up. They did. It was easy to pick up a monetary value rather than the number of kilometres that mangroves were protecting, or the condition that those mangroves were in. And I think sort of having a nice large number in some respects sort of made it quite obvious. And I guess fortunately or unfortunately for Australia, we have quite large mangrove extents, so that it sort of compounded that number. I think the awareness dropped off quite quickly after we released the accounts. I guess one of the lessons we're learning at the moment is that not only do you need to put out a publication, but you need to then follow it up with supplementary analyses or working with agencies to then sort of use or replicate those numbers in social media or something like that. So there you go.
Any other reaction from this very interesting presentation? No, currently. Okay. Anyway, Michael has provided several links to them, also to the scientific articles and to your website. You can go to the website and also investigate the data in detail. So I also have been there looking at your data. So you have done a great job, I think.
Maybe I can ask one.
Yeah, Michael is asking for the floor, please.
Thank you, Kai, and thank you, Peter, for an excellent presentation. I'm personally a bit interested in the link with disaster risk management that you also mentioned. I mean, it comes from the climate change perspective, of course, but is there really a growing interest in statistics in general from ABS used by disaster risk management, or is this just kind of a first baby steps? Because I mean, me and many colleagues of mine, we will have also in the discussion later on a little bit trying what can we learn from climate change adaptation policies and using statistics for climate change adaptation for disaster risk management in general, where the scope is of course much wider than climate change. So maybe we can share a few reflections about this.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I think it's early days for us. The Australian government recently funded a new, I guess, statutory organisation to look at the impacts of climate change. It's called the Australian Climate Service, if you're looking for it on the website. The interesting part about that is it was actually put together by with employees from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, our Bureau of Meteorology, and our Geoscience Australia, which is our geoscience experts and as sort of represented by government. They're looking at, I guess, broad measures of disaster management and disaster recovery, and also thinking about some predictive tools that could be put in place to I guess, point out where some of the areas are at risk and vulnerable. It's pretty much at the end of its first year. They've worked out a framework based on social, economic and environmental domains, but we haven't had a formal release of what's intended at this particular point in time. Just that they're quite interested in the results of, or quite interested in using SEEA as a platform for the environmental side, and any modelling that we've been doing in and around that sort of coastal and flood protection. They're very, very interested in at the moment.
But we are getting to the end of this topic. Big thanks to you, Peter, and stay with us. And we will now hear how the monitoring of a nature condition in Ukraine, application of accounts, but also evaluation of natural losses. could have been done. These are just kind of initial ideas and the thoughts from our Ukrainian colleagues. Now, first time presenting these issues on your nature condition and also the evaluation of some of the issues. And Hanna Khabarova from Ukrainian Scientific Research Institute of Ecological Problems and Oksana Boretska from State Statistics Service of Ukraine will present it, and you will decide who will start. So floor is yours.
Thank you. Dear Madam Chair, dear Michael, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to participate in this meeting. Today we will present the national efforts of measurement, estimation, and describing the state of environmental in Ukraine. So the context of our presentation is focused on compiling environmental accounts and environmental monitoring nowadays. I'll start from environmental accounts. For compiling these accounts is responsible the State Statistics Service of Ukraine, which I represent today. We started compiling air emission accounts according to the program of official statistics development until 2023. It was compiled in accordance with the requirements of Annex 1 of EU Regulation 691/2011. In 2015, we adopted the methodology air emission accounts and published tables of these accounts for the period of 2013-2015. However, the data included in these tables were based on the state statistical observation only. Later, we used the National Inventory Report as a data source of greenhouse gases. The next account that we started to compile in 1920 was Environmental Protection Expenditure Account. It was developed according to the mentioned above regulation to Annex 6. For this account, we used many data sources such as statistical observation, national accounts, administrative data of Ministry of Finance, tax service, business statistics, and others. The later, we improve our knowledges for air emission compiling and updated the methodology for it. So we used National Inventory Report as a source of data of greenhouse gases and distributed them by NEIS categories and calculated bridged items for greenhouse gases. And the next step was distributing F-gases by NEIS categories. Besides this, we recalculate air emission account for 2016 and 2019, according to the last updated methodology. Regarding to the improvement of air environmental protection expenditure account, in 2021, we updated the methodology and subtables for auxiliary production of environmental protection service that allowed to detail the auxiliary production by NEIS categories. And on this slide, I put a useful link for air emission accounts and environmental protection expenditure account on the website of State Statistics Service. And they show, there are the links of tables and methodologies. On the next slide, I want to tell a couple of words about state statistics service expectation for compiling environmental accounts. According to new program of official statistic development until 2028, we have to continue implementation of regulation 691, and we plan to compile physical energy flow account in 2027, environmental related taxes by economic activities account in 2028. And besides this, we have to compile the forest account in 2028. So we have an ambitious plans for the future, but we have a lot of challenges on this way too. And the first one is a low awareness of authorities, scientists and societies about importance of environmental accounts. And the second one is lack of coordination and data supply for compiling environmental accounts, especially from authorities and institutions. There are a lot of information produced by national authorities, but they are separated and disaggregated. And there are some difficulties to obtain the data bases in appropriate level or classification. There is one more challenges. It is changes in legislation during the state of war in Ukraine. In 2022, Ukraine adopted the law of the protection of interests of enterprises that submit statistical reports and other documents during the period of martial law or a state of war. Due to this law, some enterprises may not report to the statistical office. As a result, we have underestimation of real situation, in particular in the environmental sphere. Approximately 20% of respondents didn't submit statistical reports in 2022. For example, the data of air emission from enterprises in 2022 are lower than in 2021, and it is not described a real situation on air pollution. And the last but not the least, it is a lack of qualificative employees in state statistics service. On the end of 2023, we have quite a large reduction in the number of employees at the main statistical office in Ukraine. There were fired more than 100 employees. Now I turn the floor to my colleague Hanna. She will tell about monitoring environmental situation in Ukraine nowadays.
Thank you, Secretariat. Thank you, Oksana. I continue our presentation. Statistical data on emission of greenhouse gases and air pollution. Pollutants comply with international conventions and are regulated by the legislation of Ukraine on environmental policy and adaptation to climate change and are described in the Unified State Web Portal of Open Data. The official website of the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Natural Resources of Ukraine has created a function module of the Unified Environmental Platform ecosystem, which consists of a website and a mobile application, EcoZagroza. It's designed to automatically collect and record information of environmental threats in real time and with the geographical reference. In the EcoZagroza, you can find a detailed map of air monitoring stations showing stations in each region. You can also find a map of radiation pollution and monitoring and a map of environmental assessment of water resources, showing the number of stations and a list of relevant applications for the treats detected in real time. Detailed hourly estimation of air quality index are calculated using a formula European Protection Agency for the main air pollutant particular matter 2.5 micron in Ukrainian settlements and displayed on the map. The pollution index is assessed in accordance with the air quality index for particular matter pollution scale by color and level of pollution. The EcoCity system demonstrates a map of air quality monitoring stations in Ukraine according to the Environmental Protection Agency scale in real time by color and pollution level, which change with the concentration registration. The following map demonstrates radiation pollution and monitoring stations. For example, this is data for the station in the city Slavyansk in Donetsk region. Monitoring data in Ukraine are also displayed in the unified environmental system Safe EcoBot, which combines data from different platforms for collecting and processing data on the current state of the environmental pollution and environmental protection tools. Air quality index for particular matter monitoring data is shown on the map for the last 48 hours in the city Kryvyi Rih in Dnipro region, and air quality index for particular matter is defined as harmful to health. Safe EcoBot also shows analysis and a map of fires in Ukraine with details for each region. This system automatically collects data from NASA's FIRM system every hour, analyzes fires in Ukraine, counts their number, and displays them on a fire map. The map shows the dynamic of fires on the territory of Ukraine and separately in the Kharkiv region for the last 2 years, in real time for the last 24 hours. The number of fires over than 1 hectares are increased for 36 times compared with the year the war started and remain to be significant source of greenhouse gases emissions. EcoZagroza application contains relevant information on the damages caused by the war in Ukraine by category of environmental impact. The table provides information on losses and damages to air caused by forest fires and oil products fires, burning of the other objects, emissions of poisonous substances into the air. The damages were calculated according to national methodology adopted by Ministry of Environmental Protection and Natural Resources of Ukraine. Damages and losses have been calculated in accordance with the resolution of Cabinet of Ministry of Ukraine and have been included in the report 2023 for the period from 24 February 2022 till 1st September 2023. The distribution of greenhouse gases emissions in the CO2 equivalent caused by war was made according to the global approach offered by the leading author of the report, Leonard de Klerk. Calculations of greenhouse gases in CO2 equivalent were made in lean with the methodology of 2006 IPCC guidance for national greenhouse gases inventories. On a pie chart, we can see the highest share of greenhouse gases in CO2 equivalent caused by reconstruction, warfare, and fires.
And I want to summarize our presentation and our message today. So in 2024, Ukraine is going to use a new software for compiling greenhouse gas inventory in accordance with the recommendation of Paris Agreement. And there will be additional chapter about fires, which include data for the fires caused by war. And we assume that we can distribute this data and add it into the air emission accounts for 2022. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for this initial overview of what you have been doing and work you have been carrying out regarding the application of the environmental accounts in Ukraine. So is there some questions from the floor? Yeah, okay, yeah, please. Yeah.
Your mic.
Yeah, microphone is.
Nice presentation. I'm interested for the greenhouse gases inventories. You said that is a primary source for data for this inventory. Why I'm asking this? Because in my country, this inventory is prepared by special institutions, Macedonian Academy of Science and Arts, and unfortunately they worked only if they are paid extra money under the project. So the last greenhouse gases inventory is for 2019, and I am not in the position to compile data for the rest of the years. So I'm asking you, who is in charge for preparation of this greenhouse gases inventory and inventory of pollutants, statistical office or other institution? Thank you.
I will collect next questions as well. Yeah, there is Arturo. Yeah, please. European Commission.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. It's not a question, it's a comment for Ukraine. I want to congratulate them for the progress they have achieved in the production of environmental accounts. I'm happy to see that they are using the technical specifications that we use in the European Union. And I take note of the challenges, technical challenges they mentioned in the slide about the technical challenges, and we are happy to offer technical support for the improvement of the statistics. Thank you.
Hanna? Oh.
Thank you for the questions. Regarding to the national inventory report for greenhouse gases, in Ukraine for compiling the tables for national inventory report is responsible the budget organization, which work close with the Ministry of Environment, and they annually create the reports, collect information from statistical offices on different spheres. Energy statistics, environmental statistics, waste statistics, agriculture statistics, and so on. So our office provides them the information for calculation, but this separate organization make a calculation and creates a report and submits them into the UNFCCC website. And I want to thank you for the purposes of technical assessment, and it's a great pleasure for us, and we can think about our next environmental accounts, and maybe we can contact with you. Thank you.
Okay, in case there is no any further. Oh, okay. Okay, I didn't see. George, yeah, please.
Just a little comment. I would like to congratulate this progress in this direction. And so your slides, your activity for me is like a heroism. I hope that the war soon competent, these damages will be restored. So, Slava Ukraine, thank you very much.
Okay, I will just shortly summarize that we had a kind of a very rich session, in sense that we had a kind of a very developed overview from the GIC about the work that we are doing, and showing how the contribution of ecosystems to economy, how it could be modeled and measured, and with data, statistics, models are also made available now for all of us to investigate, in addition to a national work, what we do. And also the policy perspective, what was presented by Sjerd, and 3 country presentations, which actually gave kind of very different insights to the, also depending on the perspectives and interests and policy uses in the countries. And thinking of a session we are just finalizing about the ecosystems and vulnerabilities. I'd like to say from the words from the Lisbeth reports, which I also suggest everyone to read, that we write there in the beginning that ecosystems are inherently, human society is inherently embedded in ecosystems, and depending on the flows of the services and the condition of the ecosystems. And if there is this one direction flow from ecosystems to our societies, there has to be another back flow as well. And this is the flow which we will tackle in the next panel, and this is the expenditures. But we will look over, actually today on the expenditures related mostly to the climate change. But yes, thank you for those who were in a session of ecosystem condition vulnerabilities and loss of ecosystem services. And we will now look at the response measures and how to tackle response measures better. So thank you all in our panel 3C. And please all panelists which will come here, I will moderate the next panel as well to join us here.
Yeah, so we're moving on to 3D, the panel discussion, so we can make a quick change of seats. And so you can stand up for a few minutes also if you want to. It's a long time to sit down. And you have around 1 hour for the panel, and if you can wrap it up earlier a bit, we don't mind. Thank you. Yeah, I think you try to keep it kind of brief and Okay, so we will move on to the panel because we are running out of time and we also want to hear all the interesting discussions still. So I guess we have all of our panelists here and I will hand it over to our moderator. I will hand it over to our moderator, who is Kaija from the previous session. So go ahead.
Colleagues, please.
Turn the mic.
So now we are getting to the response side. So it's as the title of today's panel would be informing climate change and disaster risk related policies with SEEA expenditure count. Initially, we thought of thinking more widely of with SEEA, but the topic itself is huge, so we decided to narrow it down to the issue of or account of expenditures. So going back to what we have been talking today in the morning, just as where we had the ecosystem condition issue now in between. So let's kind of repeat what we know today as actually the issue we are dealing is quite huge. So there is, so we all agree, there is a significant and increasing policy interest in measuring expenditures, or what is the concept of expenditure? Maybe financing of the key policy demands, and one of those is climate change mitigation, adaptation. Of course, another part, there is a disaster risk assessment, and we also partly touched upon this in the last session 3C. And we also heard in the morning that a range of these budget tagging practices exist and here and there. And those usually take place outside of a statistical community. And we see that also the business accounting and financial community, there is also increasing interest in obtaining measures of green and or sustainable finance, and various taxonomies have been produced for this purpose. And if we think what we have, are there any new things or something which is a news now from last year? So on session 2C, Isabel was presenting us the SIP classification of environmental purposes, which has been adopted on last statistical commission. And this is a large big milestone for SEEA as well. And in the SEP, in the annexes, we have a mapping to various policy demands, and but at the same time it keeps this primary purpose classification system. And among these mapping exercises, there is also one which is related to the climate change. And when, in addition, we have learned in session 3B that that classifications of functions of government, COFOG, there is a plan to revise it in coming years, and the task team for doing so has been already established. And there was an initial proposal how to extend it and which demands to bring in, and also the ideas of a first and secondary purpose in order to get the full coverage of environmental aspects to be tackled in environmental accounts. So now we are planning actually to have a in this setting first initial discussion and how the SEEA expenditure account or some components of it could be better organized in order to inform policy demands better, and also how to feed into the discussion of climate change related adaptation and disaster risk management particular. So our current accounts well enough developed already? What do you think? Or is it just the communication problems? Or do we really miss something? We have learned today a lot of us, we are specialists, we know, but there are pieces and bits and pieces missing. And getting now to the point, I think I've covered mostly these issues which have been bothering us here. I will come to the panel and ask people who actually are the SEEA experts, and then later on, we will tackle disaster risk related issues in a second phase of our discussions. And I would like to ask from our SEEA people, what are your lessons learned, the challenges faced when you have been informing your environmental policy demands? I think you have. Maybe start with Isabel.
Yes, thank you very much, Kaya. In terms of, let's say, how we can learn from and improve those SEEA expenditure accounts, I think we have already quite valuable accounts there. Maybe in terms of communication, they may be a little bit too technical and a little bit demanding as well for our country compilers. And we may need somehow to try to simplify, at least in the communication to policymakers. And this may come as well from the fact that we are using, this terminology of expenditures that is not so easy when you're not familiar for the EESA, so kind of this national accounts terminology. And here we have seen clearly that our users, they are interested in investment data. So not so much the full kind of all categories of expenditure like we do have, consumption or gross fixed capital formation, but they would like to focus on investment data. So indeed, we hoped that with the new classification of environmental purposes, we would be able as well somehow to put back the data to aggregate those pieces from the classification and from the accounts to answer those policy questions on investment. But of course, we can provide more than this. And I think here as well, the challenge that we have, and we have seen already from some country presentation, is first to agree on this definition of what those policy domains are, like climate change mitigation, adaptation. And then it's to find a way to treat it all together as much as possible homogeneously. So because there may be some particularities in one country or in another, but we have to find common ground on that. Yeah, well, I think I will stop for now. Thank you.
For this initial introduction, Asset, what are your experiences?
Thank you very much, Kaya. As I have just shown in my presentation, we are very at the beginning stage of implementing of SEEA environmental expenditures account, and while we had discussions with our users, they raised these questions about splitting down data by regions, for example, and compiling data in real terms, not only in current prices, and also create data that we had before 2015. And we also understand that we have a supplement with data by government sector and households. This is the activities for our future work, and we are going to focus on this. Thank you.
Julie, as previous speakers came from Eurostat and from national perspective, you have been actually operating in both lines. So could you give your insight?
Thank you. At lunchtime, I was told by our delegate or our fine colleague from DG Environment that I should wear my environment statistics glasses and at the same time wear my policy glasses. Now, everything's out of focus. This isn't working so well. This is a bit better. I like these. My rose tinted glasses. Now, yes, we have seen a number of possibilities for development here. We've got, we from the statistical system, we're used to doing certain things. Policy folks are needing some additional information. And we need to get this a bit coordinated. We're going to end up with a lot of different systems. The budget tagging works with government stuff. It doesn't get us the private side of the economy. So that's only going to get us part of the picture. We've got COFOG. I'm still on government, and it's still, from what I understand, is only really going to capture environmental protection. That's like 1980s. I don't have my 80s glasses. But I tell you, my prescription has changed. My glasses from the 1980s, they don't work for me. I need my 2023 glasses. So we need to get COFOG and get it together with the newly approved classification of environmental purposes. Sooner or later, I'm going to learn it. And so we can find the resource management that governments do more easily. We need to figure out how we can incorporate the different kinds of construction projects that need to be adapted in the human systems in our infrastructure in order to actually be able to answer some of these questions. The questions are good. I'm always glad to get those, take that perspective and look at it and understand it from their side. But I'm working in the statistical system. I'm working with the systems that I know and that I have control over, that I can continue to do the types of statistical work that's needed in order to have them be able to use it. So I think that's, for me, what I took out of not only the day, but the discussions that I appreciate having with everyone after and between our sessions. Thank you. Oh, I like these. I'll keep them on.
So, so it's not very, in that sense, a picture is not very, I understand that you think that picture is not very good regarding environmental protection expenditure account and using its total figures for climate change policy, specifically as it contains only environmental protection activity. According to old definition, these type of product activities related to these kind of products and services. And as was already also today said in the presentations, that IPCC definition on adaptation goes beyond SEEA, and that it's in the mitigation activities, the CREMA part is resource management activity part is missing. So it doesn't well allow us to have renewable energy and energy efficiency, construction. All these issues are not currently covered in the environmental protection expenditure account. So it's in that sense, we have an under-coverage probably. And I have understood that the idea now, what Eurostat has been, the idea with which Eurostat currently is going further will actually bring up new data stream, which will allow to compile statistics in coherent manner about climate change related, but not expenditure, but investments. But Isabel, why just investments? Why not expenditure?
So in EU, we have already these expenditure accounts, and we have already quite a lot of granularity there. We are having some, let's say, environmental purposes for called environmental domains, and then activities as well. We are crossing it. And here, as you mentioned, with the climate change mitigation, for example, we will cover as well not only protection of the environment, but as well resource management activities. So there is kind of a trade-off to make. And the idea is that at least not to cover all expenditures, but to focus on investments. So in this trade-off, to have a lot of characteristics, a lot of environmental domains crossed by activities. Okay, it's a little bit too much, and this we understand. So to refocus only on investments, and this, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's because of the interest from the policy makers on this part. And there has been as well already, kind of actions by the European Commission with the Green Deal, this recovery action plans and so on, focusing as well on investments. So I think this is derived from this policy needs. And the idea is indeed is to refocus not on all expenditure categories, but focus on investment here. And then it means that we will have to find a way to cover not only environmental protection, but as well the part on resource management. I guess in the short term, we may have to use statistical technical solutions to try to use whatever accounts we have, whatever data we have, and to put in place correct data collection for that part in the coming years. So we know that it may not be able to do it in 1 year time, but at least if we start now, you may have data in 2 years time. If you introduce this information, this characteristic of investment in questionnaire, you are addressing to your companies, to corporation in at least, for this part. So we are hoping to have a good technical solution to come in the short term, covering this investment part on all type of activity, including in climate change mitigation, so that there will be a kind of a bridge before somehow we will have more good data. So we will improve the quality of the data across the years. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This actually brings clarity, but of course we have to understand that we are in the middle of a massive transformation. Our people in policy actually want to know what does it cost to mitigate climate change, to adapt to climate change and all related issues as well. And this probably would be a massive exercise unless we are not getting smarter how to do it. But what about the data? Our data for this, Julie, what do you think? Our data for this exercise? What get the, is it Julie was talking about the surveys to the enterprises. So would this be a solution, or is there some other way around? What do you think?
At least in the United States, it takes many years in order to try and get a new survey going, and the cost is significant. So at this point in time, we're going to be using the methodology that we have for developing these special topic satellite accounts. And that means we can get so far, but we'll have to, as always, split product categories that have a lot of products that don't have anything to do with what we want to include. And you always have to find additional data external to the supply and use approach. So yes, there's going to be challenges with data. I think we'll have to take a multi-pronged approach to find exactly what we need. It might require, a lot of times we talk to trade organizations, some experts in the field and that kind of thing at this point. It's going to be hard to ask companies about it because they're going to think it's one thing and we are trying to capture something else. So at least at this time, we're going to try and come up with some estimates. And as we all know, as soon as you come up with estimates, that's when the fun begins. Because then you've got some numbers that people can react to. And they'll always tell you they're wrong, and they are. Statistics are always wrong. But we then often get advice on how to do this. So I always take it as a learning experience. I always want to come with the numbers, do them as well as we can, and then we'll get the experts interested and we can make progress. Thank you.
Yeah, it is that there is options to do exercise from bottom up and from top down. So it's a good compromise probably, which is valid, and we are learning by doing now. As in European countries, we will start reporting climate change investments figures in 2025 regarding the year 2023. And there are some countries who we heard today that Netherlands is compiling already data on climate change related investment, but certain products, like I said, it's not a full economy currently. So we will have quite a time ahead to advance. And I also see it's very nice, like you, I said today, that you also plan to come up with this in Kazakhstan, also to start integrating these new relevant policy needs in the production of your statistics and renewable energy and energy efficiency. But if countries are starting to do it now, there will be a question whether we will all go doing the same things. Otherwise, we will create a mess, at least in first years. So what would be now these first needs? What do you think, Isabel?
You mean first needs to have something consistent across different countries?
Yeah.
Okay. But we did have a first try, I guess, with the classification of environmental purposes when we had this mapping for climate change mitigation, which, okay, we may have a closer look because it was just as an annex. So definitely we have to go back to it and put on the table, let's say, the definition that we have chosen. And from there, in Europe, we had as well a similar, let's say, project that's or methodology that the US will apply for not using the supply and use, but at least trying to list which kind of activities are there and estimate the part of this activity that would be relevant for climate change mitigation. So I guess using the supply and use, that's what US BEA will do, having this estimation of this activity, how much is it dedicated to climate change mitigation, and that's what we did as well in EU. So hopefully this is a start to get something homogeneous, because we can apply it for all our EU countries. We can give to extra EU countries as well, let's say the methodology we have, in case some of you would be interested. But of course, I guess the first point is having a definition that is good for everyone, maybe not excellent for everyone. So there may be indeed some countries that may consider to include a little bit of extra activities that we do not include, or not consider some activity that we would include. But I guess it should cover, we are statisticians, so at least 95% of the climate change mitigation. And if we arrive at this, I think we're quite happy. And then, yeah, it will be a step process. So we do with this maybe less accurate way, and then we improve to have some better statistics. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for this promise, and also kind of taking the responsibility in this area. Julie, you have been thinking towards this operational definition for climate change mitigation and adaptation expenditures. So have you found a way? I remember your presentation in London Group last year.
Yes, have I found the way? No. You read the title of my talk. That's what I was hoping to come to this meeting and actually present. And you saw I didn't. We still are, if you will, working towards it. And I think that's why I started to say, well, what are in the boxes that I have that I'm starting out with this SEEA expenditure accounts? What would be both climate and mitigation? Where would I find these in the system that we already have? Where would I find resource management? And some of the, we're taking test cases and seeing where would they go? What would I do with this? This is what people are saying is climate change. What am I going to do with it? And the thing I'm really going to try and avoid is the terrible thing that happened when I started to go out and talk to companies in 1999 about environmental protection expenditure. And we had defined it in a certain way, and they kept talking about energy savings. Now I had to keep saying, no, energy savings is not part of environmental protection. And they were like, oh, yes, it is. So it was like we had this statistical definition over here, and when we went to talk to folks, it was something else. I want to try to have us avoid that situation. So that's why I'm taking a little bit of time using examples from media, from policy people, to find out what do folks actually mean is climate mitigation and climate adaptation, so that we don't make a statistical system definition that's not implementable. So I'm not going to be definitive at this point. I'm getting a good feeling as I'm playing with my boxes and the news, and I'm kind of putting them together. And hopefully by the end of the summer, we're going to have something a little bit more definite. Thank you.
Yeah, but I think thank you, Julie, for this answer. This is probably the same, but we are actually, quite a lot of us is experiencing currently. So it's, thank you for that. And we can't avoid touch upon the COFOG revision issue as well. So as this is something which is coming up, and the fact that COFOG statistics is in a way exclusive. It's either environmental or not. So this main and secondary purpose issue, which is now planned to be revised. So what do you think, how feasible it is that the national accounts, government statistics people in countries will start doing these two-dimensional exercises? Isabel, I'm going back to you again. No one else to ask here. In this panel, yeah?
Yeah. Well, I'm not working in government finance statistics, so somehow, I will not be the person that we will take our voice to this kind of meeting. But yeah, because the COFOG is working, let's say, with its own priorities, and this government function, they are meant, of course, to cover the total economy, and environment may not be such, let's say, important for this classification. And I think, at least from our side, it will be quite difficult to influence the COFOG revision, but definitely the idea that was demonstrated this morning to try to have the headings of the classification of environmental purpose inside the environmental function of the COFOG, I think this is a start that we would like to push. And we expect somehow the custodian agency, so UNSD, so I guess maybe it's too sure that I should give my plea, as you talk many times on behalf of UNSD. So we need to relay the voice of our community, of the environmental accounts, to start with that, and then try to go deeper with this maybe second purpose, secondary purpose, or third purpose, or whatever. But at least to start with kind of really full incorporation of the classification of environmental purpose inside the COFOG. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Sure, those aspects which we mentioned today would be probably kind of big questions for us regarding the COFOG revision process, the SEEA central framework questions, as well with primary, secondary question, but it's just a primary purpose focus, and probably SEEA research agenda as well. But we have to think of these next steps and what we will do in statistical world. So Bram, you have been active in OECD, and you have your own ideas how to proceed. So what you would count on, what you see, what is the utmost things what should be done in a first order now?
Yeah, no, thank you. So, no, I have a specific interest in this topic also because I will be representing also the OECD in this COFOG task team that has been set up. And I think this seminar actually is also a very good avenue to sort of take stock of what the SEEA community is thinking and sort of see what we should be bringing into that revision process. Yeah, so personally, I think it is an opportunity. And I think, Isabel, what you were just saying, perhaps there is a possibility, sort of a low-hanging fruit to sort of, now we have the SEP, to sort of see whether we could align those categories already. Yeah, beyond that, I think we heard these ideas about, what is it, double classifying or double tagging. Personally, I think that's an interesting idea, but having also done a little bit of work on those things in the statistical office, I also wonder how that would actually be undertaken, how much effort it would be, and because some of the tagging efforts perhaps are now being done by line ministries, would it then be the statistical office that would be doing it? So there, I think we just need to continue the discussion. And I think it would be quite interesting if there would also be some countries, for instance, that would sort of test it and try it out, how that would work. Perhaps we need to come up with some thresholds that are already existing, for instance, in the Rio markers and so on. So just to say, I think this we should continue the discussion, and I think this forum is a good avenue also for that. Thank you.
If someone from the audience still wants to contribute to the issues of to a list of issues which really needs to be pointed out, it's the time, as we will move to disaster risk indicators just very quickly now. But yeah, but I've already proposed that. Come up with a question, proposal, idea. It's time to contribute now. Okay. Oh, Armenia wants to say. Yeah, thank you. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for this very interesting discussion. From the point of view of a country, yes, I want to speak. Here in statistical community, when we speak in the same language and we understand each other. But when we come out and want to share our statistics to public, to even government, they do not understand our tables. We have to explain. So I think that one of the most important step that we need to do is dissemination of SEEA data. Now we want, for example, for our water accounts, we want to prepare infographics to make it understandable for large audience. I think that afterwards we'll receive feedback, because for many years we are publishing, we cannot receive any feedback. We no answer to our questions, whether is it good or not, whether we are on the right way. But after this publication, we hope that we will receive something. And I think that it concerns to other accounts, because inside statistics, yes, we can publish for the country level, but as Asad said, we have to do on a lower level. That means in regional, so that our government could use it inside country. I think this is very important. Thank you.
To disaster-related risk indicator, disaster risk reduction indicators topic. So climate and disaster risk reduction are interconnected in several ways. That's for sure. So you have a risk amplification. Climate change makes everything worse. Regarding your in your area, you have adaptation and resilience. It's also quite similar. You have ecosystem-based approaches. Again, the same issues, different definitions, different concepts behind. And you have infrastructure resilience questions. So in order to understand what should be measured and to achieve these goals of the disaster risk reduction and the targets, Terrapong and Kansa, could you please say a few words about how you have been involved in this work and how this climate change and disaster risk-related policies work in your area looks like? So what are these issues you're tackling? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. So my role is very different, and I found it very interesting being here because I'm not engaged in the details like you are. I am more of the strategic and policy side. So hearing the work that underlies everything that we're then doing is really interesting. So my role is that I'm a global public health advisor and an epidemiologist for the UK Health Security Agency, but I'm also co-chair of the UN's Interagency Expert Group on Disaster-Related Statistics. So there's a crossover with that. And my focus is around global disaster risk reduction, global health security, and climate change. And that's because those functions are so interlinked. We're seeing with climate change, there's a lot of disasters that are happening, and actually we're seeing an impact on the types of infectious diseases that are occurring. So actually, because of that, we've kind of linked all those things together into one role. In terms of sort of my role and particularly what I'm involved in when it comes to climate change and disaster risk-related policies, I'm currently engaged in a project with our NSO, the Office for National Statistics, and the NSOs in Ghana and Rwanda to look at developing a series of climate change and health indicators so we can actually evidence what the impact of climate change is on health. But obviously, you can't look at human health in isolation. And actually, we have to look at the ecosystem. We have to look at animal health and the environment as well. So basically, we're looking at the system as a whole. And some of that data that you produce will feed into that. And from the UK Health Security Agency's perspective, we're quite keen to begin developing work around metrics when it comes to these indicators and what detail that we need underneath there, what we need to be counting and what the scope is, and also what the definitions are as well. So that in broad covers my role around that.
Yeah, thank you. And Terrapong, can you say from your side your role and experience in the field, and then I could.
Yeah, I'm working with a statistics division, so I'm not working in a policy division. But this earlier today, I mentioned about Kansas just mentioned the IAEG, the Interagency Expert Group on Disaster-Related Statistics, that has the mandate from the StatCom to come up with a global common framework for disaster stats. And this group is co-chaired by Kansas, and I think still with SCAP in terms of the statistical contribution. The secretariat of this group is the UNDRR. If you look at this composition, we know that whatever we want to produce on the statistical side of things should make sense from the policy side. That's why we have DRR as the secretariat. And it has to be practical. And that's why we have Kansas representing a country. I think that's in line with all discussion that we have, that I think we are great statisticians. We have to be a bit of educator, a bit of communicator, and being able to communicate complex definitions that we need in our compilation. But when we talk to people, we don't need to use those terms exactly the way we compiled. But as users, how would they understand? And in our statistical table, we can make all the footnotes, right? This one measured by A, B, and C. And this could be trying to converge to that. For example, when we want to measure impact of disaster, we might call it economic loss because it's a term that the whole world understands. But we can say this is measured by 1, 2, and 3 for statistical purposes. And I think that we can meet the two worlds in it. We can actually use 2 glasses of Julie at once, and then we meet 2 birds in 1 stone.
Yeah, thank you. But which are the main important indicators what you use regarding expenditures on climate change, disaster risk reduction, but also in relation to climate change? So if you could, this is kind of this common area of work for us, discussion currently.
Yeah. So from the policy side, what we're looking at is around what are the headline indicators. So when it comes to the expenditure data, we're not wanting to know every single little bit of detail. What we're wanting to know is what we would say in the UK, the so what factor. What is the data telling us, and what do you want us to do about it at the policy level? And quite often I will get sort of colleagues coming with huge amounts of detail, which from a policy perspective, trying to unpick what the expenditure stuff means and what we do with it, it can be quite difficult. So that interpretation is really important for us to understand what we do with that. And what we're also interested in is the interlinkages. So with the expenditure accounts around the ecosystem, the environment, what is that linking or telling us about human health? What's that telling us about animal health and what we would call the One Health approach? So what we want to see is those interlinkages and to understand that better. But also, as Tirapong referred to earlier, the economic loss element is also interesting. And UNDRR, along with UNDP and the World Meteorological Organization, WMO, are launching a loss and damage database. And part of that is to actually what we're interested in knowing is what is the detail behind the loss and damage? What is going on and what can we do about some of the things that are coming out of it? But we're also interested in pivoting from a response approach to a prevention approach. Because what we want to understand is from that data, what can we do to prevent some of the harm occurring from climate change and from disasters? And quite often, without that data, we're not able to then get sustainable financing in place because actually we're not clear on what it is that we need to be spending on. And so the definitions are incredibly important because I think what's become clear to me over the last few days here is that the definitions that we're using at that policy level perhaps don't align always with the statistical definitions. And that's why some of the work around the hazard information profiles has been useful because we've got definitions around those hazards, but actually understanding how we count the information that underlies them is really important, and developing useful statistical definitions are going to be incredibly important going forward as well.
Yeah, just a few words on perhaps SEEA in general, that I personally see a broader role of SEEA in disaster reduction and statistics. Expenditure is one, and I think it's the area that we are making a lot of progress. On that, we might want to touch upon two subcomponents. We want to know how much expenditure we spend before disaster for preparedness, for prevention. And then we also want to have an set of expenditure on how much money we spend on response and recovery. And if you think of it from the strategic perspective and running country with this as a risk reduction in mind, you want to see the former getting bigger and the latter getting smaller. Because if your country is very resilient, then you spend less money in recovery and in response. Then you may need to spend a lot of money in prevention and preparedness and early warning system, for example, to the point where the same category of disaster will do no harm to you anymore. So that's the ultimate objective, right? But that's on the expenditure part. But SEEA provide other information that we need, setting up good baseline information on assets, on physical flows, because we need that when we tackle disaster response, to know exactly where things are, to know how much forest and agriculture area we have, to know where the farmers are. Those are important. And then we also think of the ecosystem accounts, right? So the role of SEEA is broader. So that's what I'm imagining.
Yeah, thank you for sure. But the assets are, in sense of assets, we have also to look at the SEEA central framework, SEEA ecosystem accounts, and the common definition, that's for sure. But as the panel's today's topic was SEEA expenditure account, how to use the SEEA expenditure account for a better policy, when we just stick to that part of it, try to stick to that part of this discussion today. And today in the morning, I think Julie had also a presentation on what should be under classification, adaptation, mitigation, expenditures, natural system, human systems, but there's also a part of disaster risk reduction, and this all had kind of overlaps in different dimensions. And I've been reading the paper also last London group, and in when I remember there was a suggestion, but better off start developing these concepts now, you know, on a common grounds. It has to go the same for disaster risk reduction, adaptation, and climate change and other areas, risk reduction, adaptation, mitigation, classification. So it's maybe quite a lot currently to ask, but what did you see?
So I'm putting both glasses on now. It's possible, but it doesn't help. No, so I don't want to oversell the SEEA. SEEA is a very good system. We've learned a lot in the last 20 years over using it. It's a good place to start for many things, but it's not the answer to all questions. However, it's a very good starting point. And I think that we need to realize that we've got a very solid starting point, and we can take that as an application. And if we start from there, we need to expand it to serve user needs, because we want to have multi-purpose data systems serving user needs. We've got new users that need to use the SEEA and expand it, but we need the core of the SEEA to, my personal opinion, we need the core of the SEEA to stay the same, and then expand it to be able to cover these other topics as our policymakers need us to put on both sets of glasses. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Julie, for reminding that this is a multi-purpose system. So thank you for bringing this on a table. But Michael, you have been working actually with both networks of people for some years. Could you actually complement here? Are we kind of missing something, some important pieces, or are we over-optimistic in our case, in our sense? Yeah.
Thank you, Kaya. Yeah, there is a possibility that we are missing important pieces of connecting the communities. As Julie was saying, with the SEEA, we have a multi-purpose tool like any other kind of official statistics. But the challenge is really to raise awareness amongst the users and to avoid creating new data silos. And I have been growing a little bit now into this disaster risk reduction community, and I see official statistics hasn't been playing really a role there. I see Kansa nodding. They have their own data systems. There is lots of duplication. And this is also why under the UN Statistical Commission, this interagency expert group that Kansa is co-chairing has been established with the objective to use official statistics to the maximum extent possible to inform disaster risk management on the national, subnational, but also on the global level. And there is a big opportunity now through this global disaster risk statistics framework. Sorry, did I get it correctly? It would be a missed opportunity not to raise awareness among the SEEA community that there is such a development, and that we try to find out how can we utilize the SEEA in the best way possible. And expenditure accounts is just one aspect of it, but SEEA ecosystem accounts and so on and so forth. So I think we should really use this opportunity that there is something in development to at least utilize the SEEA where it makes sense, and to find out where it doesn't make sense or where we have to complement it with other data. I also would like to inform that the Conference of European Statisticians has in June endorsed a pilot set of indicators on disaster risk, which we have been developed together with some of you and also with disaster risk experts. It's a pilot set that's going to be tested, but one part of the testing and further development and description of the indicators will be which of them can already be produced by SEEA or some kind of SEEA-based, at least conceptually. So, because we have limited of time, but I'm very happy that at least we could plant a seed here in the seminar with having a little bit of input from the disaster community. Thank you, Kansa, thank you, Terrapong, for this, because my personal opinion is really that is important. We should look stronger also at disaster risk from the broader scope, which goes beyond climate change. We can learn a lot from climate change, but the scope is much, much wider. And I would see it as a missed opportunity not to consider this in ongoing procedures of reviewing classifications, developing new guidelines, and so on and so forth. So I stop here because of for the sake of time. Thank you.
Kansan Terapong, do you want to complement this, to say still some addition?
So yes, just very quickly, just sort of complementing what's already been said. I think that there's a huge opportunity here. You know, working with yourselves and being able to connect the different groups together. There's a risk here of duplication occurring, and a lot of what I've heard, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I'm seeing this elsewhere. And actually having these conversations now to prevent that duplication from getting worse is really important. So I think there is some real opportunity here to be able to use the data, to connect the data, and to be able to effectively manage situations better through policy, because we've actually got everything available to us. We don't see SEEA as the only part of this. It's part of a much bigger jigsaw, and there are key pieces here, and we just need to make sure that all the key pieces are together. So thank you.
Right, just also complement what Michael just said in terms of connecting with other communities. On the same way that we see other communities, the associations community exactly the same, that we are like close small group and love to talk technicals and when people don't understand us, then why don't they understand us? So it's the same two sides of the same coin, right? The question would be how do we understand each other better and fast? because if you talk to your decision makers, I believe they are not looking for perfect data. They perhaps look for good enough data that statisticians feel comfortable sharing with them. If not, they are as happy to get data elsewhere, because they are under the group of people who are ready to provide whatever data faster. Perhaps not as sure in terms of quality, but at least they're faster. I think we have a role to play. One is to be able to wear many hats or many glasses and act faster together, I guess. Thanks.
Thank you. Our time is running out. I'm starting to conclude. If someone else does not want to say. Luxembourg, yeah, please. Yeah. Brief, yes.
Je vais être bref, mais je vais parler en français.
I'll be brief, but I will be speaking in French. And I'd like to thank the interpreters by doing so. I very much enjoyed this discussion, and the last idea was very interesting, because I think that political decision makers actually don't need environmental accounts. It's scary to say that, isn't it? But I think that what decision makers need is indicators that answer their questions. And to respond to what was said, it's true that we're amongst ourselves. We're talking about accounts, definitions, classifications, and we're very pleased when we achieve our objective of having a full account sequence. But that's not what decision makers want. What they want is they want to know, is my economy circular? I can make a parallel with the national accounts. What the Prime Minister wants to know is, what is the GDP growth? If you ask him what the specific definitions are, then he might not come up with it. But what he wants is to know whether there's any growth. So there's, I think, a translation exercise that needs to be done between what we are able to calculate and what decision makers actually want to see. And therefore, I think we need to give much more thought to synthetic summary indicators for that purpose. And I'll stop here. Thank you.
Can I just say one thing briefly? Don't get me wrong. I think we need our community to be ahead of the curves in terms of what is needed in statistical world. We really need it, and we take as much time as we need. But we also need interim solutions to bigger questions right? We might need to spend another 5 years to come up with a good classification. That is okay. And I think we should. But during 5 years, the questions are not waiting for us. So we perhaps need to think of another way of making use of any data we have, making use of what we know, and provide good enough indicators to answer a bigger question. But don't feel like sit back and say, okay, we don't need it anymore. We still do need a lot of work in statistical world.
Seems to be too short, actually, but here we are. We're getting close to the end of the day. So what I could say in conclusion, so it's difficult to conclude, but there is one thing what actually the point we started, there is a high demand on data on climate change expenditure, or let's say even like in sense of investments in kind of in our world, more like there's a need for investments figures. And in order we stated to be harmonized and understandable and usable to everyone, for us it would be a kind of a massive exercise to to get it all kind of done, to get all the pieces, like Julia was saying, that now I want to get all the pieces, together and to them kind of classified in a harmonized way and then statistics produced. So, and this, so it brings us to the scope issue, so what to include, what to not to include, so to work with the classifications. First step. And not to forget that SEEA is a multi-purpose system, so it's we have to keep this in mind and work together with others, and like today with disaster risk community. And yeah, and there are of course the weaker parts in our work as well, like the adaptation investments. It's quite vague concept still, mitigation better. But anyhow, I can imagine that after today's discussion, we can actually have this kind of a list of issues. Maybe Bram already has it, the list, and Michael, list of issues, what should be tackled. In one hand, you have a COFOG revision process, get always environment, second purposes on a picture, so how to get the full picture, full coverage. We have a SEEA central revision process to get the aspects to there, and also we have topics for the SEEA research agenda, I guess. And I would actually ask Bram if you would to complement to that conclusion with something.
No, thank you. You said it well. And
okay, so I thank all panelists. So it was bit longer, not much actually, so we also started a bit later, but I would say thank you all. It was fruitful, it was interesting for me, it was inspiring, and I hope we will start working towards producing the tool which would enhance for the society to provide information in order to have a tool to tackle the climate change and monitoring instruments. Thank you all for joining us today here.
Thank you, Kaija, and thank you for the panelists. It was really interesting discussion to have as the last substantial session for this seminar. We still have one session left, and we will go through it because it is also very important, which is the main conclusions and recommendations for the whole seminar. And we will start this session by hearing short feedback from the World Cafe and summary of the seminar. And I think this will be presented by Santaro, who has been doing really great notes and keeping track of our discussions. So.
World Cafe is by me.
Oh, World Cafe is by Michael. You have been also doing a good job. So.
Don't worry, I will be very quick for the sake of time. I decided to pick one point from each table that I think is important, so that also those who couldn't attend the World Cafe, which was an informal segment of the event, know a little bit about it. So we had one table by the European Commission, hosted by Eurostat and DG Environment, and they explained mainly the SEEA accounts that are mandatory and voluntary in the European Union. And there were several questions about the upcoming ecosystem accounts in the EU. For example, will all countries produce data for the same ecosystem services, and what guidelines are there or will be developed? We had a table hosted by OECD. There was coming different feedback. For example, one country would be ready to share experience in developing an accounts on water flow, water assets, and related statistics on water quality as potential input into the feasibility study currently carried out by OECD. So I think this was also very valuable input into this work. We had one table hosted by my colleagues from UNECE Forestry Division. One outcome of them is there is a need for greater exchange between forest sector experts and SEEA experts to share knowledge on topics such as forest balance and so on. I also have the feeling that there could be a bit of stronger collaboration. Then we had a table of UNCTAD on trade and biodiversity statistics. They concluded that trade and biodiversity statistics are highly relevant for the compilation of environmental economic accounts, and there are lots of opportunities to link the two work streams, particularly regarding material flow accounts, so reconciliation between value and volume data would be necessary. We had the group hosted by Tara Pong on disaster-related statistics, so that now I have the right term, sorry for that. We heard a lot of it, so just one point here. Also, disaster-related statistics may be relatively new to the SEEA community. They are not necessarily new to NSOs. Different departments are engaged in different kinds of disaster-related statistics. And he also mentioned the importance of this new global disaster-related statistics framework. We had a table hosted by the colleague from ECE Sustainable Energy Division, presenting the United Nations Framework Classification for Resources. And one conclusion was that this framework classification can promote sustainable resource management, including progress on circular economy, ensuring that economic development is balanced with environmental stewardship and social responsibility. This is the input I have received from the table host that provided information back to me, and we will add more details then to the report so that you have the full picture. If I may directly, I can, if that's okay, Johanna, I just display the summary, and you can take over from there. If I manage, yeah, so I can do this in presentation mode if you want. Just 1 second. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So it was quite challenging task to summarize 3-day discussions into 3 slides. I tried my best, and I will not read everything here, but I try to summarize as much as possible. And for the opening session, it was just update from international organizations, and the most relevant point for everyone is the update of SEEA Central Framework, which was endorsed by Statistical Commission at the UN in this March. And session 2A, which was about the concept of a circular economy, and it was also quite conceptual session. But one concrete example was the presentation of circular material use rate. And also following this presentation, there was discussion that there could be also different valid choices for similar indicators. And then session 2E, which was waste accounts, and where we discussed usefulness and difficulties in using waste accounts for measuring circularity. And for example, global classification of waste could be helpful and considered in SEEA Central Framework update. And then session 2C, which was about the environmental goods and services sector accounts. And one interesting point was about the socio-economic opportunities as for informing policymakers on development of circular economy sector. And then session 2D, which was about the measuring flows of biomass. And for example, relevance of quality criteria for biomaterials, recoverability element, and boundary delineation of bioeconomy was pointed out based on country examples. Then, it's okay, thank you. And session 2B, which was, plastic session. And one interesting example was this plastic toolkit based on the classification system plastic keys. And also following this discussion, there was a concrete suggestion on associating plastic keys with carbon emissions. And session 2E to F, we have also discussed that we can start measuring circular economy building on currently available data, and we don't need to take everything into the central framework update, but we can also develop specific guidelines. And then from today, it was the about climate change adaptation response for session 3. And so for 3A, we discussed that there are ongoing efforts, but still there are some gaps and challenges. And decision criteria such as impact, primary and secondary purpose are being discussed. And then last slide. Yeah. So for session 3B, which was about climate change expenditures, and we have discussed about the integrated approach, allowing a secondary purpose like double tagging, and consideration of nature-based solution were also suggested for the COFOC revision. And for session 3C, about the ecosystem condition and ecosystem services, we discussed also about the role of SEEA ecosystem accounting for the methodological basis for some of the indicators under the global biodiversity framework. And also collaboration through CBD focal points was suggested. And lastly, for this last session, I think the most important point which was highlighted is the importance of communication. I think it was also suggested for climate change adaptation, but also for disaster risk related statistics. So I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Santaro, for these really good and concrete conclusions and recommendations. Next, I would ask Michael if you can present us some outcomes of the participant survey that we had also during this seminar. Yes, and the PowerPoint that Santaro showed will be uploaded to the seminar webpage, so you can download it from there. So you will have also this document.
So yeah, very briefly, and I mean, we will draft a report which will include all this, and we will do a kind of written consultation among all participants, so you can have a say, of course, on these conclusions. Unfortunately, we don't have time today to discuss it in detail, but I hope Santaro captured very well most of the things. Yeah, very quickly, thank you to everybody who participated in this survey. It was 17 only, but okay. So those are the main results, 16 from the room, 1 from the web stream. And I think the most important decision of today, hopefully, is, do you agree that OECD and UNECE should organize another SEEA seminar in about 1 year's time? 100% of this fantastic samples said yes. So we hope we can really kind of formally also agree on that. Question is, of course, every year the format. I mean, unfortunately, in the UN, for the time being, we don't have much flexibility. On the other hand side, it's very important to understand what countries and delegates really wish. I think the message is clear. So to have some in-person meeting with the possibility to follow in a web stream, my understanding is like similar as the setup we had these days, but there is a strong support to have it as an in-person meeting, and the duration of 3 days was 1 person more was favoring 3 days over 2 days. So I understand the setup kind of identical or similar to what we had today. It was also interesting to see what should be the topics that should be discussed. So discussion on SEEA relationships with emerging issues such as circular economy, nature-based solutions. So more the policy link was here supported a lot. Then, but then also on the technical side, issues related to data gap filling using new techniques. and then followed by strategies to enhance use of SEEA accounts in analyzing policy, followed by practical implementation examples. And one suggestion was valuation of ecosystem accounts. In terms of SEEA modules, there was no other, but ecosystem services and air emissions are here the clear winners, followed by water, taxes, subsidies, forests, and EPEA. Interestingly, material flow accounts have received 0 voices. Yeah, there was also the question about practical examples. 6 said yes, but only 3 practical examples were provided. So we'll go back to these countries when we set up the next seminar or for other work that we have. And then OECD has added this bonus question related to the 5 priority SEEA accounts with the question that they should be included in the future implementation of additional global databases. There was basically the feedback that these SEEA accounts are good enough and some additional suggestions that OECD can take into consideration. I think that was all. I stop here.
Thank you, Michael. So I guess for the adoption of conclusions and recommendations, as mentioned, there will be the written sort of process for that. But as a main conclusion, I think we can adopt the decision to have another seminar in 1 year. And that would be the main conclusion that we had today. And I think this then was our last session. And only thing we have left which is actually closing of the seminar. And I would like to leave you with one idea of my own that I have been thinking now during the panel and also the analogy about the classes that has been quite prominent today. And I think we will all leave with that idea as well in our memory. And I think it has been really inspiring to hear from all sides, from the policy use, from the academy, from the countries, from the organizations. And I think also sometimes it's really good to have the sun classes and sometimes the normal classes, but I think we will also need more skills to have these, I don't know what's the official term for it, but the glasses that change with the context. So when you go out in the sun, you will get the sunglasses. On the inside, you have the clear glasses. So we need to be able to also look at our data sometimes from the policy point of view and with the context also then from the really like the structural central framework point of view. So I think we need also these contextual classes, if I can say so. But so yeah, this is my intake on the classes issue. And I would like to then thank all the organizers. It has been really, I think we made a good program, even though I might be a little biased to say it, but I think this year having these 2 overarching teams was really good program. And of course, I would like to thank all the speakers and chairs and panelists and everyone participating in making the program, all the participants for being so active and in person here, and also the ones that have been watching online. If you have made it through the whole 3 days on YouTube, I really congratulate you. I think it's a lot of streaming to watch. And yes, I would also, of course, like to thank our interpreters. It has been really great to have you here again and also giving us a little bit of flexibility in our times. Of course, the conference services and Evita here helping myself also with all my requests. And yes, everyone involved, I think it has been a great 3 days and we have all learned a lot. So with these words, I think I will close. Michael, yeah.
Hammer again, but just let me say, first of all, most importantly, you have just received an email from Evita with the evaluation survey. Take 5 minutes and please complete it. This is very important to us to get better and to know what we should change, how we can improve. That's one thing. Secondly, even if it's called Joint OECD UNECE Seminar, of course, the organizing team and organizing committee is much bigger with several international organizations, country representatives. I would like to use the opportunity to thank all of them. And a special thanks, of course, to Johanna. And before she closes, maybe we can give her a big applause for that.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I think it is a good time to use this for the last time. So thank you. I will now close the seminar for this year.
Yeah, and all the recordings are available on YouTube.